I was doing about an hour of work on the computer this morning before we go in this afternoon, and it was on workplace violence, which I thought was quite interesting because, it's something that was already on our mind, especially since this past week after a bit of an instance, where we experienced that once again. Unfortunately, it is a lot more common than we sometimes realize or talk about. And initially, I wasn't going to speak about it because I just didn't feel that it was necessarily worth my time. But then, it has like continually persisted to come up, and I figured, why not? We're due for another video, anyways. Let's chat about it a little bit. And we've been quite productive this morning after having a 3-day weekend, and this is the start of a 4-day work week for us. We're on top of the world beach. So we've already gotten so much done. I wasn't particularly planning on filming anything this morning, but then I was like, why not? Let's do it while I'm waiting for my laundry to finish drying and I can switch it over. So, yes, where do we begin with workplace violence or bullying in the workplace? I've been working in healthcare since 2016, so about 9 years now, and I have heard people say that healthcare is kind of riddled with bullying. I've heard people say about how it's like, it's known for the place that like a lot of mean girls in high school like move into that career as a profession. And I can see why. But it's also very sad and unfortunate because there's very like vulnerable people, I mean, it's like it's no surprise that people are attracted to positions of power like that. And but it's very sad. And then when you're in a position where, your job is to advocate or to take care of people, and then you see that happening and it goes either unnoticed or unchecked, it's very disheartening. And so again, this is one of those things that we would like to talk a lot more here, I guess, at some point. Yeah, so we've been in healthcare for a while. Typically we work out in the community where we go to people's homes and we work with them one-on-one. But sometimes this includes going to facilities and places that we don't typically work with people that we don't really know. And, there's all kinds of dynamics and different ways that things are ran then. And I've been visiting a particular facility for, I don't know, like a month and a half, going on like 2 months now, which was longer than originally intended. But it doesn't really matter. There have been some issues with the person that I've been caring for, and then when speaking up about it or just trying to get some answers or just better care for that person, I was met with some resistance, unfortunately, and then even some just straight up bullying where a particular person had an issue with me asking them very simple questions last week, like, did you know such and such about, this person? Or we need such and such supplies, right? And this person got so upset that they literally started raising their voice at me and cursed at me before storming off. So I went ahead, and originally I was just going to brush it off. Like, these kinds of things, unfortunately, they do happen all the time. And typically it's just not, worth our time or attention to invest much energy or effort into doing anything about it. However, when there is like a reoccurring issue that isn't being tended to, and it involves the proper care of a person, then I have a bit of an issue with it. It's not even necessarily so much of how they react as much as it is like if you're doing this to one person, if this is your behavior, your action, in a public professional setting in the workplace, then how many other people are you doing this to, And so I took an issue with that. I went to the office of this place and, unfortunately that didn't go too well either. So to me, it just showed like, okay, I can see where this is coming from, right? A lot of times leadership is what kind of runs how things go. And so if leadership isn't very strong or they're not holding people accountable to the way that they care for folks or their lack of care for folks, then there's nothing you can really do beyond that point, you know, unless you want to escalate the situation. We haven't quite decided to do something like that yet. But it definitely, at the very least, taints the view of the guests there. You know, like, I'm there for a short time to assist them ultimately, right? Like, as a one-on-one, when I'm in a facility or any place that I go, right, it is an assistance to those other people who would primarily be caring for that person. So by my presence there, like, I'm helping to lighten the load of what would normally be the work for them to do. And, you know, unfortunately, like, not everyone sees things in that way. There can be a sense of entitlement of, you know, because there's this person, then they are responsible for everything and we don't have to do anything, or what are very basic needs. And that's just not realistic. It's not helpful. And then to, you know, become upset towards a particular individual, even such as like raising your voice and calling them names or talking about them, like, that was what was crazy to me. Is when I went to the office, I found out that apparently this particular person had already gone to them before this and had been having an issue with me, and I had no idea. When I'm working with someone, just the two of us, you know, day after day, and I barely interact with these people, I don't even know their names, to have a personal issue with me about, like, the way that I am or the way that I work is very strange to me. Again, unless, like, they feel a personal sense of, I don't know, they take some sort of issue. I kind of tend to see that as a form of guilt, particularly when I am addressing or calling them out on not properly caring for the person because I'm questioning their care. But again, it's like, if you're already doing what someone needs done for them and you're not guilty of potentially neglecting that person, then there would be no need or reason to be upset with another individual, because you're already doing what is needing to be done, what's being asked of you. Very basic, simple things. Yeah. So unfortunately, there is a lot of that kind of stuff in healthcare. And aside from the way that it makes me personally feel, right? It's like I walk into these places and, you know, I have a job to do, which is to care for people. But unfortunately, right, a lot of times in the healthcare sector, not everyone approaches their job from a place of empathy, of feeling for the people they're caring for, of putting themselves in their shoes, of thinking, I might be in this position one day, or what if this was my family member? What if this was my child or my sibling or my parent? Like, a lot of people just simply don't see it that way. There are some who do, and anytime I interact with people like that, it's lovely to see people who have personal experience with it, where they have had loved ones or currently do in a situation like that, where they're vulnerable and they're needing care. And they're also needing, beyond like their physical needs, they're also needing like mental stimulation. They're needing affection, like emotional attention. And a lot of people are neglected in that way. They don't get that kind of attention, even if their basic needs are met. And a lot of times they're not even getting that. So we don't want to get too much in it today, but I can even feel like, as I'm talking it now, where there's like a little bit of like rattling inside of me. In the moment that I was in the office the other week, I even like started to physically shake. And that is not the first time that has happened either. Typically we try to like hide that, but it is a great example of what workplace violence or bullying in the workplace is, because in that moment, like, people aren't thinking about how they're making other people feel, how they're affecting them in a very negative way. And it does feel like violence. It's not conducive to a nurturing environment, which is what people need when it comes to healthcare. They don't need to be on their toes. They don't need to be, concerned about the next time that person is walking into the room and they have an attitude, or they're going to flip out on them, that they're going to be cursing or saying inappropriate things to them. These are just things that should not be happening. And for as long as I've been in healthcare now, there's been a lot of that. And, it's not in the job description when you go into this field that you're going to necessarily run into these things as often as we do, even though there is monthly and yearly training on these different topics. Like in the actual initial training that we do, they don't tell you like people are going to be consistently pushing up against your boundaries. You're going to have to take on a much larger mental and emotional load beyond just the basic description of like these are the tasks you get done. They don't talk about the other stuff, right? And I've even had some conversations in my own place of work about boundaries and like needing to teach and train caregivers specifically about the need for appropriate boundaries and like what that would specifically look like, because a lot of times we're thrown into situations without that kind of training and then we're just kind of left to fend for ourselves and figure it out, but at what cost? So we've been through a lot over the years, and again, I don't particularly want to get too much into that at this very moment, but I figured after doing the one training this morning and the reminder of these things and having another experience of this last week and how it kind of affected us over the week and how we were trying to like release that energy. And, you know, I was very thankful because I had a 3-day weekend. I was able to like stay away from that place and like recenter in my own energy. But there's still like, okay, it's Monday now and I'm going back to this place. And then there's that feeling of, I don't really want to return to this place because of how they treated me the last week. But I'm also still concerned about the person I'm caring for. Like, what's happening when I'm not there? Has anything changed? Will anything change? And ultimately, I'm thankful for, you know, when that contract or that time comes to a close that I won't be there any longer. But again, it's like, what impression have you left? Not only as a business, but like on a personal level of who you are as not only a professional, but also as a human being. Like, what impression did you leave on the people that came here to visit you? So... and a lot of times people just aren't thinking of these things. They're just thinking of themselves and like what will make their job easier, what will make them feel better themselves, even if that means harming another person or like projecting their own internal issues onto other people. It's sad. It's disheartening, but ultimately the best thing we can do in these situations, right, is learn from it, to reflect that, you know, on ourselves and like what can we do to the best of our ability in any situation to help. And ultimately, if people do not see the error in their own ways or their own contribution to things like this, then understanding the need to step back and ultimately walk away. But again, it's like continuing to look at the heart in situations and see, you know, what am I responsible for? What am I not, right? That's a big core of what boundaries are. And then what can I do and what can I not do? And, you know, return back to ourselves and recenter, regather, and just look forward to, you know, the next thing that we have going on outside of that. But yeah, really not looking forward to returning today and, you know, in the near future, but excited to see my person, love them. But yeah, just it's sad that like that is a consistent thing that's going on. And this is why violence is considered, you know, cyclical in nature, as many things are, because it just goes on and on and on. It's this never-ending cycle that people contribute to, often unconsciously, but that still doesn't make it okay to continue contributing to it. And I feel for these people too, because it makes me question and wonder, you know, like what is going on in their personal life that they're bringing whatever that bullshit is into the workplace and into other people's lives that have nothing to do with it. But such is life. Yeah, so I just wanted to briefly touch on it, get a little bit off of my chest, out of my mind, the things that we've been carrying, and go search my laundry here. Yeah, so I hope everyone has a wonderful Monday and a good week, and I'll see you again soon.